Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Mark Delaney. Mark is a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2022, and he also has his own podcast called The Veteran Semi-Professional. Mark and I recently connected via Zoom to talk more about his background, how he decided to pursue an MBA, what prompted him to launch his own podcast, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my interview with Mark Delaney. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me today, Brett. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great to have you here. We're going to talk about your podcast. So this is maybe a little bit of a podcast within a podcast, a bit like a dream within a dream. Before we get to that, though, let me check in, see how you're doing. How are things? How are you doing these days?
Generally doing well. The first semester here at Darden is going full steam ahead. You know, they say very much like kind of the image and the reputation of Darden is an MBA program that very much puts an emphasis on academic excellence. And it definitely lives up to the brochure. The classes have been challenging, but I will say, you know, a few things about that. One, the professors have just been absolutely outstanding. One, both in like the in-class instruction and then the out-of-class instruction. And as someone who's coming from a non-business background, I've absolutely found the resources and everything that I need to succeed. And then my classmates have also been absolutely extraordinary. My learning team, you know, keeps my head above water in the learning world. And so like the whole environment community here has really been helpful with the tough academic schedule.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about class right now because we are in the midst of this COVID-19 adaptation. Darden's made the big pivot. We've got virtual classes. We've got what are called hybrid classes where you have some in-person participants, some virtual participants joining the same class session. What does class look like for you right now?
Yeah. So this quarter we're taking 5 classes and 3 of them are in the hybrid model. And so essentially what that means for anyone listening is that once every 3 weeks, roughly, I get to go in for those classes that are in person. I still have 2 classes that are entirely virtual, and it's just kind of more or less up to the professor's discretion based on their personal situation. But what I've really found is that the hybrid model, obviously we would prefer to be in person, but there's constraints in the world right now. But the professors have done a really excellent job, and so have the tech teams behind the background in setting the classroom environment to be conducive to the hybrid model. I see professors making the extra efforts to include those who are calling in from the virtual world to include them in the classroom discussion. And, there were little bumps, maybe like the first week or so, but we got over it pretty quickly. And at this point, it's pretty seamless. And when we do have some type of technical issue, there's someone standing right outside the door, ready to hop in and fix everything. And it's usually no more than a moment or two that a system is down. So it has in no way been a serious impact when sometimes, there is that small technical glitch that happens.
No, that's great to hear. And just talking informally with faculty about teaching hybrid classes, there's a learning curve for them, right? They're used to having everybody in the same room or everybody in a virtual environment. Although Darden faculty, great teachers to begin with and take that time very, very seriously and really want to be great at the teaching part of their jobs. I want to talk about the social piece too. We've gotten questions about this. As you mentioned, one of the constraints that we have right now from a health and safety guidelines standpoint is we're just not able to get a lot of people together as a group, and so that's been driving a lot of our classroom decisions. Right, our classroom capacity went from about 65 for most of our MBA classrooms to about 20. And then there's also been evolving social guidelines from the university. Earlier point, 15 people could gather, then it was 5, then it's 10 as we continue to sort of deal with the virus and its progression. What has the social piece looked like for you, Mark? Because I know some of our listeners are wondering, are you still able to connect with your classmates? You're still able to network, do fun things?
The first thing I'll say is, one, we're all in the same boat. It's not like, I have my own particular set of guidelines. Like we're all dealing with this together. And I know for me personally, my learning team has been like the foundational social aspect because we meet every day for 1.5 to 2 hours or so to discuss the next day's classes. And just having that consistent group and that consistent, face-to-face interaction with people has been fantastic. There are absolutely challenges when it comes to meeting in larger groups. We have guidelines that we have to follow. Um, but the student organizations here at Darden have really made an extraordinary effort to abide by those guidelines without having that stop social schedule. Like we're still able to meet, we're still able to do things. We have to just follow certain guidelines. But that actually hasn't, stopped that from happening. So the social aspect is definitely still there.
That's great to hear. I'm not surprised. We heard a lot in the spring about all the student creativity at work, and it sounds like maybe recently there was even like a relay race that happened, sort of small pods, teams competing in a relay race across Charlottesville. Did you participate in that? You know about that?
Yeah, yeah. So it was all part of the Darden Cup, which is a large competition between the different sections here at Darden. And so we had the Darden Relay. And now normally all of that would happen in a, one single field on Darden, but because of the social distancing requirements, it happened at a much larger grounds across North Grounds here at UVA. Uh, but it was kind of fine. It totally worked out. We had a few people having to run some longer legs in between some of the events, but that enabled us to stay within those smaller groups and maintain distancing. And we still had plenty of fun that day. That didn't slow anyone down.
Yeah, Darden Cup, great tradition that it is. It's for those who have been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that the Darden Cup is this, as Mark describes, it's intersection competition, includes all sorts of contests, typically sports, things like soccer, and there's like a field day, this kind of relay competition. And there's also other things, sometimes basketball, I think it's been featured. There's a talent show in past years, trivia as well. I think last year they also did sort of what maybe looked a bit like a wellness challenge where you track all your exercise on a sort of digital device, and that is entered in too. So there are even technological solutions to the current situation. So it's been great to see student creativity. So Mark, let's talk a little bit more about your background. What did
So
you do before coming to business school?
yeah, so prior to Darden, I spent 8 years in the Army, and so I did ROTC at the University of Maryland during all 4 years as an undergrad, and then upon graduating from Maryland, I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, and spent most of my time at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I deployed overseas 3 times, and then ended up leaving active duty and leaving the military this past December.
And did you always know that you wanted to pursue an MBA?
Honestly, no. It was really not on my radar until later in my military career when I had decided that okay, I think I'm going to leave the service. And as I started looking towards options of what I wanted to do, I was like, okay. As I kind of went through my options and decided that I think an MBA would really be the best fit given my career goals and knowing that I feel confident leading teams and working in difficult environments, but I know that I didn't have the business acumen and that an MBA would be able to provide me those practical skills that I could then match with those experiences from the military and then take that into my next career.
So I'm curious about how you found out about Darden. It sounds like you were at least in the region. Maybe that had something to do with it. But how did you learn more about this program?
So actually, it was from a friend who wasn't a Darden grad, but he went to UVA Law, and I mentioned to him that I was contemplating an MBA, and the first thing that he said to me is you got to check out Darden, you got to check out the Darden Military Association, fantastic organization, fantastic school, and so that was like my first highlight, and pretty much after that, Darden was always at the top of the list, um, and that's really like what got the bug going on coming to Darden.
So you mentioned earlier that you came to business school without having a lot of background in business. In fact, MBA, the decision to pursue an MBA, as you noted, was kind of driven by this kind of, you felt like you had these gaps. Um, how did you kind of get over that hurdle and say, you know what, that's all right? Did you think about, brushing up in the summer prior to the start of school, maybe getting familiar with some of these things? Did you do Darden before Darden? Imagine some of our listeners are kind of wondering the same thing. We say all the time, no right background for Darden. But I'm curious if you took advantage of some of these resources that are available.
I definitely did. Yes. So I took some summer classes to just brush up on some basic business knowledge. And then when Darden before Darden, excuse me, was offered, yeah, I hopped right on it. And that was truly helpful in getting me ready for those, because class starts day one and you got to be ready to go. And Darden before Darden was excellent in preparing me to come in ready to do well.
Yeah, so we talked about Darden before Darden. We talked about Be Ready as well, which is a sort of asynchronous virtual product that's out there. Did you do that?
I did, and I had taken another similar course, and I think actually left that, if this wasn't a Darden course, I had left that one maybe knowing less than I had started before. And then I took the Be Ready modules before Darden and walked away feeling much more confident about subjects like accounting and finance that I had never been, that I never worked with before.
Yeah, we had Mark Lipson on here to talk about Be Ready and Darden before Darden over the summer when Be Ready was launching. And it's clear that he put a lot of, he and the team of people who worked on that put a lot of time and effort into the development of that. He has such great passion for preparing people for Darden. He's a finance professor, but if you hear his story, kind of comes at it from, a very interesting background. And really, I mean, Darden faculty, we did a Ask Me Anything session with Yael, who teaches in the QA area. And all the faculty talk about the importance of diversity in the classroom and having different perspectives and different backgrounds. And we emphasize it time and again from an admissions committee standpoint. I'm wondering, what does that look like for you thus far as you get started in these case discussions? Is that something you can feel as a student?
Absolutely. There's lots of different backgrounds, both from the different industries and sectors that people came from, but then I mean different countries and different cultures as well, and everyone has a different perspective. And what's great is the people here are really smart, and it shows in these discussions because they're able to bring their perspective into the conversation while also reaching and trying to understand someone who came from a totally different background, their perspective, and kind of mesh the two together. And it's a really cool thing to watch because we have some really good people in the classroom.
And the faculty do such a great job of getting people involved, right? So we talked a little bit about it before, sort of the complexity of managing virtual and in-person participants, but it's such a great skill that they have to kind of whose background can I reach to at this time? Who hasn't said much? How do I get that person involved? Is that something that's made an impression on you? It's always jumped out to me.
Absolutely. And I've talked about this with my classmates a few times where you can see it in action when, someone answers a question, maybe it was a cold call, and their first response is like kind of just hitting the surface of what the professor is looking for. But the professor knows that they know more about the answer. And they do this, they're just really excellent at kind of guiding you through and pushing you in the direction while causing you to think and like build confidence that you know what you're talking about. And it's really cool to see in action because you're like seeing this master of teaching at work, and it's a cool thing. Yeah.
So let's get into a little bit of the section pride now. What section are you in?
Oh, I'm in section C, the C suite.
All right. One of the cool things about the sections, and we've talked about it a bunch here on the podcast, but every section, new students every year in that first year section. Although there is a stickiness to the section identity when alums come back and they still say, "Hey, oh, section B or section A or section C." Um, for those listening, it goes A through E, and then we have a J section this year, the January group starting. And so, tell us a little bit about the norms for section C.
Yes, it. We've had to develop all new sets of norms with the hybrid and virtual model, but I think we've come to a pretty happy medium, and it has to do a lot with the literally like the technical details of having class on Zoom and like how do you use the chat properly and how do you raise your hand in a virtual environment. These things might sound a little petty, but when you're in classes for as long as we are, they start to matter. They start to matter in a way where people can feel empowered to speak their voice, one, and also be able to pay attention. And so we've come to a good equilibrium of how to navigate the virtual world that the class is voted on and decide, and we've all had a voice in it. And then we've incorporated our professors into that process as well, so that one, they're able to provide feedback on our perspective, and then understand like what we as a class want, so that they can work within our norms, present the classroom environment that we're trying to achieve.
And the sections always have great traditions. Anything that you would want to highlight here? Cheers, things you do to celebrate really good answers or recognize students who've made an exceptional contribution. Anything that jumps out?
Yeah. So our cheer, if anyone has seen Remember the Titans, there is the cheer when the football team's getting together, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, and like that's how we start our day in Section C.
That's a great way to start start a day. Um, a good movie too.
Great movie. Yeah.
Inspirational. So let's talk a little bit more about your learning team before we get into your sort of podcast. A couple more questions for you here. I want to stay with your first year experience. Tell us a little bit more about the mix of people, high level. Tell us a little bit more about the background of the people on your learning team.
Yeah. So we a couple of different backgrounds and a couple of different interests as well. So, right now we have 6 people on the team. I'm, come from the military, planning to go and pursue entrepreneurship. Then we have 3 people who are recruiting for consulting, and then 2 that are looking for investment banking. And we have a CPA. We have some people who've come from an operations background. Some people come from a consulting background or in a business, financial analysis background as well. And having that mix has just been tremendous because you can almost guarantee that if one of us, there's at least one person who knows how to do whatever the problem set is. I'm remembering too about a week ago, and I was responsible for preparing the accounting case the next day. And I went into my learning team and I said, everybody, I spent a long time on this. I really tried. I'm feeling about 50% confident with my answers right now. And the CPA on our team was like, Mark, don't worry about it. I already took care of it. And like, I already answered everything. And here we are ready to go. Let's go over this together. And it just made everything better because like we were all looking out for each other with that.
No, that's great to hear, and I appreciate that additional detail because we get asked all the time how the teams get put together, and I think it's great to hear what the teams look like, that you're working with. Because I do think it reinforces the message, right? We have try to have different backgrounds, people different interests, and really kind of a microcosm so that you do have that immediate touch point. And of course, you're all spread out across different sections, right?
Yes. Yes, we are.
All right. Well, we invited you on the podcast because we learned that you have a podcast, and podcast that's sort of near and dear to your experience. It sounds like as a transitioning military officer moving into the private sector. What is the name of your podcast, Mark?
So the name of my podcast is the Veteran Semi-Professional.
Okay, well, inspiration for the name. We got to ask about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I started a website as I was getting out of the military. I had some frustrations with the process and the lack of information and resources that I could find. And so, having a passion for writing and a bit of an entrepreneurial itch, I started a website called The Veteran Professional, and I started sharing good resources that I had found as well as information. And I wrote a lot of information about being a military applicant applying for MBA programs on the site. And so I was writing a lot, and then I just kind of felt that creating a podcast was the next step in the creative evolution. But I wanted to kind of branch out beyond just talking about professional career options and MBA programs. I also wanted to begin to broach other topics related to the veteran community, namely things like mental health. I wanted to present organizations that are doing things for veterans to show the community what is out there. And so I took the tagline semi-professional because it's not necessarily a career podcast, even though it's a lot of what I talk about. But I also wanted to leave room to talk about those other issues that affect the community.
No, I love that because we talked to a number of service members here as admissions committee members, and I think one of the biggest challenges that folks who are coming from the military to the private sector, really contemplating this transition, face is, well, I don't know what I don't know yet, and I'm not sure what may be possible, and I'm not sure what's out there. And so, a lot of where we spend our time is trying to help people think about potential next steps. It sounds like you spent a lot of time thinking about this too. What tips would you share, like just right off the jump, with somebody contemplating that transition?
I think one very much. I always tell everyone like no one owes you anything. We're all I'm extremely proud of my service. I'm proud of the people that I served with, but I think the first step is to enter into it with humility and recognize that nothing's gonna be handed to you. And then next, just like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes it's hard to make that decision when you're thinking about it in such an information vacuum. So I would encourage anyone, reach out to people. It's super easy to go on LinkedIn and type in, Darden Army, and me and all the other vets here will pop up, and you can reach out to us, or whatever target company you're looking at, same thing. And you can find those veterans, and uh, it's a really easy conversation to go to someone and say, I'm a transitioning military member. I want to learn more what it is about you're doing. Can I take your time for 15 to 20 minutes to just talk and understand what your role is like? And I almost guarantee you they will be more than accommodating and willing to reach out to you and talk and share their experiences with you.
I love that last point, because it's something that we oftentimes highlight because people, it's interesting when you say the word network or networking, people can sometimes have a negative association with that. It sounds transactional, like you're asking someone for something. Um, Whereas we just really encourage people to think about it as an informational activity, right? You are learning. You are not really asking that person for anything other than their time, which is something. You might, in a slightly different world, buy them a cup of coffee, or at least write them a thank you note at least. But you're really kind of asking them to take 30 minutes out of their day, tell you a little bit about their story and anything that they might share with you as a next step, or wish they would have known, or a tip. Um, I think that makes it feel more approachable. Are there networking tips you offer folks as to how to kind of get past that block that people can oftentimes have?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is, one, like, you're never going to get a yes if you don't ask. So if you make the effort to reach out, then the worst that can happen is someone says no. And I would just say, like, whenever you reach out, just be humble, be respectful, ask for, make your first ask small, and then, make sure you're on time for the phone call or the Zoom chat or whatever it is. Have some questions prepared so you make their time worthwhile and valuable. And then at best, I always have a pen and paper with me to try and take notes when I'm talking to someone like that. And then additionally, in the conversation, with who else do you think that I should talk to? It's a great way for them. You know what? In talking to you for a few minutes, Mark, I think, I should reference you to this person who I think would be a really good connection for you to make. And it's just a good way to leave the conversation with an action and then buy in for another conversation.
That's a great piece of advice. That's the way that informational networking works. One conversation leads to another, until maybe you are actually talking to somebody about a job at the end of those conversations. Just it's amazing what happens. Mark, one of the things that I've also noticed is that sometimes our transitioning military folks don't realize what networks they have available to them already. They may actually have friends, colleagues who have already gone ahead and made these transitions, either to MBA programs or to organizations, and don't necessarily think about those people. Has that been your experience?
Very much so. I see that all the time with people. I think they underestimate the power of the vet net, as I call it, the veteran network. And there are both some formal organizations out there that make a deliberate effort to help veterans network and find mentors. But then there are also some kind of more informal networks. But it's absolutely out there. We all spent, those of us who served, spent time in uniform together, and that camaraderie doesn't go away the instant you take your uniform off and head off into the civilian world. It really stays for a long time. And I found that to continue to be true, that veterans want to help other veterans. And so I would encourage anyone to lean into that community. And then also other communities you had beforehand. You could have come from your undergraduate world, or your family connections, or whatever it may be. I'm sure you have other networks that are worth leaning into to find out about.
Also a really good point. And the things, take a step, just pause, think about your networks, think about people that you might know, do a little bit of research on LinkedIn. And Mark, as you noted, the DMA, Darden Military Association, is a great place to get started. We also have on the executive MBA side a veterans group too. And so these groups have been really, really helpful in terms of fielding those initial, hey, I'd just like to make a connection, talk to somebody. And I think one of the things that people do talk about a lot is through those organizations, you're able to kind of find some of that camaraderie as well. People with that shared experience have that background that you have, and become really important touch points for people throughout their MBA experience.
And if I can make one more point too, I would encourage anyone to be open to opportunity everywhere. I actually landed a very small part-time consulting role on Reddit, of all places. And I think most people like, that's not where I go for a job. But I connected with a PR firm CEO, talked to them for a little bit, and I'm now working with them kind of as a veteran advisor in some of their marketing, all on Reddit.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I want to talk a little bit more about how you got interested in entrepreneurship, which maybe intersects a little bit with that last comment. How did you discover, that this is what you wanted to do? I think that's another challenge sometimes for our transitioning military folks is they come out of this world where the next step and the next step is perhaps a bit clearer, and now you're in this ambiguous world where you can maybe do anything.
Yes, yeah. I think I've kind of always had the itch for a while. Um, I mean, I remember being a kid and shoveling sidewalks and mowing lawns, and always kind of having a little neighborhood business making money, and I just enjoyed it. And I enjoy seeing a problem and that I recognize as a problem and being like, what what are the solutions that I can create to scratch this itch for myself and to fix this problem for myself. And I just enjoy that process. And then starting my website and my podcast, I've very much enjoyed the creative process and building and starting something from scratch. And like that has just kind of pushed me into wanting to do that myself.
I'm curious about what you've learned as you've done your podcast. I will say, as the host of our admissions podcast, I've learned a ton about Darden, the student experience, just things that I never anticipated, that have come my way just by having conversations with people. Are there lessons that jump out to you from the conversations you've been having?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I had a really good conversation last night with someone. We just recorded an episode, and I won't get into the full details, but this guest on my show came very close to suicide at one point, and going through the conversation, really kind of like what stopped him was having this realization that no one's coming to save you except for yourself. And I've been like chewing on that for the last day since that talk of we all are able to craft our own destiny and make the life that we want, and that power is just very much within you. So that's just kind of a small lesson that I learned from last night in particular, but in general from podcasting. One, it's been a fantastic way to build a network because it's very easy to reach out to someone and say, "Do you want to talk on my show about yourself for 45 minutes?" Uh, and I'm actually in the process of working with some of my section mates who are interested in starting their own podcast about entrepreneurship and venture capital, because that's a space that they want to go into primarily for that purpose of to build their knowledge and network. Um, but in running the show and trying to build an audience, very much what I have found is that consistency is key, and just doing those reliable things that you need to do and just doing them consistently is the key to making something work over the long run.
No, that's a great point. Just, you commit to a publication schedule, or you just, this is what this podcast is about. We're going to focus on that. Whatever that might mean is a great point. I wonder what advice you would share with our prospective students, kind of shifting a little bit here. You're now, in quarter two, you get a full quarter of classes, busy, lots going on. What would you share with prospective students listening to this, thinking about Darden?
I would very much encourage anyone to ensure that whatever school you apply to, or whatever schools you're thinking about, make sure they're where you want to go, and that it's the experience that you are looking for, and not that someone else, or your parents or your boss or your employers or whoever else is looking for. It's a fantastic 2 years to learn a lot about yourself, to learn about some other people, and learn, like really deep dive into understanding the business world. And if you're putting yourself into an environment that isn't going to mesh well with who you are, then you're not going to get the most out of the experience. And so I would just encourage anyone to make sure that the schools that you're looking at align with you and are what you want, because that's how you're going to get the most out of it.
It's good advice. There are so many opinions in this world when you start asking, well, what's the best MBA program? Or, is this such and such school a good school? And if the more you can focus on you through this process, the better off you'll be, and figure out, do that introspecting, that self-reflecting. What's your value set? What creates the environment for you to have a great experience, and what school aligns with that? Um, that's great advice, Mark. So if someone wanted to go listen to, say, the semi-professional, the podcast that you have, the
Mhm.
veteran semi-professional, podcast. Where might they find that?
So I'm currently on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and now Amazon Music.
All right, covering the waterfront out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, Mark, know how busy things are right now. I appreciate your taking time. It's great, catching up with you a little bit about your podcast. Um, can I dip into maybe a little bit of what you're planning and the episodes to come? Are you that far out and you're planning anything that you're looking forward to tackling on the podcast that maybe our listeners should look forward to?
Sure. Yeah. So a few episodes that I've recorded and just haven't launched yet. So I did one a few weeks ago with the chief marketing officer of a major nonprofit that works with veteran mental health. And so I think I'm really looking forward to sharing that episode because he spoke a lot about his personal struggles with mental health and then, what he's doing and what their organization is doing now. And then kind of just like bounce around to the different topics that I get into. Tomorrow, I'm having a conversation with he's currently on active duty. Actually, he's an extremely successful real estate investor. So we're going to talk about, his business that he's been doing on the side, in addition to being on active duty, and, what those who are interested in having a side hustle can look at. And then the conversation actually I had last night was extremely impactful, and talking with this guest who went through a really tough time and has now kind of found his niche and is really excelling in the world that he's in now.
That sounds like a great slate of episodes. I'm gonna have to check that out. So again, thanks for your time today, Mark. It was a pleasure catching up with you. Thank you for all of your insights for our prospective student listeners, and hope you stay safe out there.
Yeah, you too, Brett. Thanks for having me on today. It was a good time. Thanks.
And that was my interview with Mark Delaney, a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2022. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.